So it started with Cobblestone alone, and then you moved to New York.
That's right. The year after, when I was 5.
And
my little hobo bag.
And you went to school?
I went to school. I went to Brooklyn College here for my MFA. And that was the only time I really studied writing, yeah.
So you didn't study in undergrad?
No, I studied English and with a concentration in Irish poetry. Because I really wanted to be employed when I graduated. So I studied Irish poetry.
So Brooklyn College, I know there's a lot of Brooklyn College people here today. So you wrote stories and poetry?
I wrote poetry until I was 25. Nothing but poetry. But then I got rejected from 5 of the best poetry schools for an MFA. And I was in California, I was living in California. So I literally drove to the Pacific Ocean and had a crossroads moment. Like, what am I going to do? I just got rejected from the 5 best programs. I like to say that I was rejected from the 5 best programs because it makes me feel better. But I didn't want to stop writing, and I had never written fiction. And I thought to write fiction, you had to be good at math. And I don't know why I thought that. I'm not good at math, and so I figured I would never be able to write fiction. But I didn't want to stop writing, so I had a writer. I moved to New York because I'm like, well, I'll just move to New York because that's where writers go.
That's where fiction writers go.
That's where fiction writers go.
Yeah.
Brooklyn, which I didn't know yet, but yeah. And I found a writers group, and I started writing fiction. I started trying to write fiction, and Jesse Hassinger, who's here right now, was in my writers group, and he and my writers group taught me how to write fiction, and made me think I could because I thought to write fiction you had to be like Hemingway, but then there's like this new contemporary, funny, quirky fiction you can also write, and that's when I figured out my role, that I could fit in that. I could do it too. But it took a long time. And the first story I wrote was the Bob Dylan story, and they helped me very much with that.
It was. And was that the first story you had published?
Yeah. Yeah, in the Mississippi Review.
Yeah, so that's north of, and it went on to win a Pushcart Prize.
That's right.
It was also recently featured in Electric Literature's recommended reading. So for those of you who missed it, first one, and of course it's in the book. Buy the book, and we read recommended reading as well. So, one story we used to talk about, some stories just have legs, and by legs I mean we would publish them in one story, and then they would, get picked up for anthologies, and there's just sort of more and more things. Just sort of, it was like one story would open up a whole door. Did you feel like that happened for you with North of?
I guess very slowly, but I was so scarred by the process of even getting that story published that North of was rejected by 45 literary magazines before Mississippi Review took a chance on it. So I was literally thinking that it was cursed and that no one wanted to publish it because Bob Dylan was in it and it was just a stupid story and I was a dumb person and that I would never ever get published. That's what I was thinking. So the fact that other people want to publish it now, it's just like I still think of 45 rejection letters and it's wonderful, but yeah, I guess it does have legs, but before that it had no legs. It had the opposite of legs.
You just needed the right person to see the
I just needed the right person to see it.
It's true.
Well, when I teach now, and I teach for one story, I like to tell my students, all that says is that I sent it to 46 literary magazines, and that you can't get rejected if you don't send out. You can't get accepted if you don't get rejected if you don't send out. So, I mean, that's all that means to me. I will never recoup postage for what I spent on it. That's not the point.
So you continue to publish stories and working various jobs, including one story. And then, what I want to know, I'm sure you probably told this story to some of the people here, but did you get a phone call or an email? Like, when did you know that you won the Iowa Prize?
About Iowa?
Yeah.
I had forgotten that I submitted to Iowa because I had kind of given up on the collection, because to get a collection of short stories published is like seeing a white whale, as my friend Anne would say. And I had given up, and I had moved on to a novel that I'm writing currently and revising about jazz and jazz musicians in Philadelphia, and that's what I was working on. I mean, I was taking guitar lessons and studying everything I could about jazz, and that was my focus. So I had forgotten that I submitted and didn't think I would have a shot anyway. I got an email from Jim at University of Iowa, and it was a very quick email, like, just wanted to write and tell you that you won the University of Iowa Short Fiction Award and that you're going to get published. Your book is going to get published, and after 10 years of trying, I thought it was a weird rejection letter. So I read it again, and I was like, what kind of messed up rejection letter? Now what to me? Because that collection has been rejected every which way to Sunday. So I just thought it was a weird, and it took me a couple times. Then I put my head down and I started crying, and I felt just every day of those 9 years when I was working on it. But yeah, it was an email. And he emailed me and didn't call me because I had forgotten in my haste to include a photo of her. So it was like, hey, you won, can you call me? We don't know where you are. You didn't include your contact info.
So email, tears, and then I hope there was some dancing to Madonna or something.
There was. Yeah, there was some champagne. And everything since then has been really amazing and surreal.
So in this collection, you've got a lot of elements sort of magic. You've got dancing nuns, college students who can make churches disappear, ideal holographic versions of boyfriends and girlfriends, salesmen who carry hearts around in their suitcases, college professors moonlighting as house crashers, and Bob Dylan showing up for Thanksgiving dinner. So my question to you is, when you're writing your stories, do you think, how do these magical elements sort of find their way in? Do you think of those first and then base the story around it, or they just sort of find their way in as you're going along?
I normally try to serve the story. So if it calls for someone to turn into a refrigerator, and I want to make some point about, human change, then if it serves the story, I'll add a magical element. But then I'll admit, sometimes I'm just like, wouldn't it be cool if I wrote a story where a guy wakes up knowing how to speak French, just randomly, and I've done that. But then if I do it that way, then I have to go back and figure out what the significance of that would be. So I can have fun with the magic, but it has to mean something. It has to eventually serve the story. So that's either at the outset or in revision, but either way, I have to eventually make sure that it does that. If that answers your question.
It does.
Okay, good.
And another question I had, I've got lots of questions, but I'm going to open up to you guys eventually, but now I'm on the floor, which is very exciting. So, another thing I was thinking about when I was reading the book, enjoying it so much, was almost every story except for one is told in the first person. And I know that, you've got a background in poetry, you've also done like sort of a lot of stage and theater, and I just wondered, was that on purpose, as a way of shaping the collection, or was it just sort of, is that your natural sort of place where you go, first person, and why do you think that is?
I know, why is that?
Because they're very different characters, but...
You should tell me, you're the editor. Because you and I have had a conversation about first person before, and I have that in my head sometimes. I do have a strong voice, and I have the strong first person thing going. That said, I've tried to upend it in the work I'm doing now by doing third person, but I don't know, it worked the best with first person, and so I just went with it. It was fun. I was interested in it. Normally I can't, if I'm not having fun with it, it doesn't read as fun, so I just stopped doing it. And I noticed that the things I get stuck on are things that aren't interesting to me, so I have to go back and figure out how to make it fun. Many times that includes first person in this book.
And I was thinking also, you were telling me a story about how you would recite. You recite your stories,
yes.
And you sort of say your work out loud, and you can feel your voice, as you're reading the collection too. It feels like, there are times where it feels like, I am telling you this story. Yeah. And there's a immediacy and sort of an urgency to it.
Yeah. And I do think that, I was thinking about this today. I think we should all, all of us who are trying to make art in any way should all be informed by other art, other genres and whatever. And I'm lucky to have a theater background, a semblance of a theater background, because playwrights really know how to write dialogue. And so all this time I spent in crazy music theater with my friends and doing bell kicks or whatever, I was listening to these rhythms of playwrights and musical writers, and if I have any knack with dialogue, it's because of that. It's because of the time I spent on stage hearing words performed every single night, the time I spent studying Shakespeare. And if I have any knack at titling things or going into a sentence and making it interesting syntax-wise, it's because I love poets. And then music, don't even get me started. We'll be here until tomorrow morning. But yeah, so I think that's what informs it as well.
Why did you decide to title the whole collection Safest Houses? And did you feel like that particular story, it's the title of a story in the collection as well, did you feel like that was an anchor story for you? Or how did you, why did you decide on that instead of one of the other titles?
Because I think it was the best at braceleting all of the other stories like beads on a wire. Like Safest Houses, first I like the sound of that, Safest Houses, and many of the stories involve a house in some way, either a salesman coming to a house, or a house burning down, or a house getting robbed by a sad English professor. So Safe as Houses had the right ironic twist to me too, because houses are not safe, and they're never safe. And you make them safe as much as you can, but I just liked the idea of that silly phrase, which I found out recently. I knew it was an English phrase, but I didn't realize it was used often in Australia. So apparently it means very, very, very safe, like put your money in houses. But it's supposed to be a little ironic too, because nothing's really ever foolproof.
When I was reading the book, there was this one line that really stuck out to me from Great Wondrous, and it was this: "In a place inside me I thought was dead, a bell rings." And when I read that, I was like, you know what, I feel like that's actually, for each of the stories, it was happening to almost each of the characters in the stories. Mm-hmm. Like they were having this moment where they were getting over something. They were, the characters are all recovering from different kinds of losses, and they're often tripping over themselves, as they're trying to get over these losses. But ultimately, they end in these places of hope. The bell does ring in these places that have become dead to you, and particularly in the final story, Carry Me Home, Sisters of St. Joseph, where Ruby makes sure each kid gets a rainbow sticker.
Yeah.
So I wonder if is that like sort of a life philosophy for you, or is this something that sort of came as you were writing the book, and as you said, you were writing that one story that you were having a hard time, and so you were that was how you were making it through all these nights where you couldn't sleep. You were reciting the story, and even at the end of that story where the character writes, "Help me," and people do come.
Right. Well, that's why
it is the stripper that she comes.
No, the stripper is important. Like the stripper is like, it's someone in the world who is important, and like that to me, it's like even the stripper comes. It's neat. What was the question?
The question is sort of like, is that something you set out to do? Do you feel like it's a life philosophy? Like this idea of like there's always ending in a place of hope. Like the bell will eventually ring in the places where you are dead inside.
I mean, if it's hopefully, if you're lucky. And honestly, yeah, if you're lucky. My personal philosophy is certainly err on the side of kindness. I find that does not work in fiction. So I think I ask for a lot with a lot of these stories with the sentimental bells. George Saunders, who's one of my favorite writers, says, if you start out like really ridiculous and awkward and weird and silly in the beginning, it buys you a lot of saccharin later. So if you are like wild and surreal and magical and weird and off-putting, like in that paragraph about people in wheelchairs, that's a tough one for me to read. I don't believe that. It's irreverent and it's not meant to be serious. And my mother worked with people with severe mental disabilities for 40 years, and I very much grew up with people with disabilities, and that is why I wrote that paragraph. But it's not meant to be taken seriously. That could be seen as levity, but it's not meant to be, it's sad. And so life has all of that in it. And to me, the world is really weird. And but you also have to encompass the kindness too. And I think many writers I know, they're always talking, it's always like the sad stuff, and the sordid stuff, and the weird stuff, and the hurtful things, and it's hard to write happiness.
It's very hard.
It's really hard, and and that's what I was trying to do, and I think sometimes I succeeded, and I think sometimes I failed. And I can tell you the stories where I failed, but I'm not going to tell you tonight. But I know where I did, and I know where I got away with it, or I know where at least I got away with a little more.
Well, I just want to say one more thing before we open it up for questions. You dedicate this book to your grandparents, and today you wrote a really lovely blog post on your fantastic website, which everyone should visit. And it's about your grandfather and about how the stories in your book, you were sort of imagining that you were building a boat.
Yeah.
The sails, the hull, the rudder, all these different pieces. And I'm just going to read you to yourself.
Okay.
This is what she said, and I found it very touching. "Today I launched my little ship. No one will know its flaws better than me. I wish it safe passage, but I have no scores to settle. It is enough to have spent 10 years making it, It connects me to my past, to my ancestors who made things with their hands, and my future, whatever shape it may take. Today, one of my dreams comes true. And so it's so great for all of us to be here with you in this day where you've got this dream coming true. So I'm sure people want to shout outs, give some shout outs or ask some questions in the audience. There's going to be one person first. First person gets a pretzel. Yes, in front. Yeah.
Well, since you were talking about your first book, introducing this book, I want to ask you about your next book.
Oh, yeah.
You said you're working on a novel, revising it. Tell us a little bit about that.
It is a book that takes place in Philadelphia over the course of a single day. And it's Christmas Eve. It has three main characters. One is a little girl jazz singing prodigy, and her day. And then a pair of star-crossed lovers, like old friends, who've known each other forever and who are in love with each other but can't really be together for various reasons. And then them over the course of a day during a dinner party, and then they take this beautiful walk. Hopefully, eventually, it will be a beautiful walk through Philadelphia. And then a jazz club owner. The book is called 2 a.m. at the Cat's Pajamas, and the jazz club owner owns the Cat's Pajamas. All of the people I just mentioned end up at the Cat's Pajamas at the end of the night, and then at 2 a.m. all of their lives collide. and so that's what it's about. It's about jazz, and it's about love.
Any other questions?
You can just all like questions.
Yes?
Hi, Joe.
I just have a question about the structure of the story that you read.
Oh, yeah.
It seems to jump around a lot, and I don't know the terminology, but maybe like the voice or the tense, where, you know, like sometimes it's in the office, and sometimes it's, we get this image of you like on the street, analyzing people or whatever, and I just wonder how you write them and how you order them, and if you ever just switch a chunk around, or if one follows another for a reason, because there's these little pauses, and then you jump to another place, and it's like, I love trying to connect them and kind of find out why, and I never get to ask the writer why. So I'm just
so interesting.
curious, like, how that comes together.
What a great question. It's very organic, but then, you know, I read it and I'm organic, and I let myself go from world to world organically, but then when I go back, I revise it and I think of what the reader's attention is doing as I jump from thing to thing. You know, it's probably, you know, how I make these decisions and revision is probably due to attention span and rhythm. As in, like, if I'm talking too much about The Office, I'll think, all right, the next paragraph I want to go to something completely different. That'll just jar, because that story specifically is meant to be jarring. It's meant to be weird and odd and jockey you from place to place. So I intentionally meant it to be that way. But yeah, but as you picked up on, it's not a formula. It's not like Office, Insight,
Right.
Mother, and then back again. It's more.
Did you write them in order, or like
No.
that you can remember?
No, I jockeyed around a little bit and then went back and finessed the jockeying kind of thing. Does that make sense?
There's also in the story there's, I think, visually when you're doing the faxing in the story, it's like it becomes almost like a bit of it's like facts. So we know that sort of is interesting, sort of actually visually on the page. I found that when I was reading the story. And then when different objects come back in, we start with the Christmas tree lights, and then Christmas tree lights coming back at the end, and and even the wheelchairs. There's like a slight drop of the wheelchairs at the beginning, and then when it comes back, it's just sort of coming back with greater meaning. So for me, in the story, that story in particular, which is very sort of, I feel like, a non-traditional narrative, those were the things that were grounding me and moving me throughout the piece. So.
Totally, and that's definitely through revision.
Yeah.
Because I would mention it, and then I would be like, oh, I want to go back to that. Make sure I get back to that later. Yeah.
Any other questions, or is it pretzel time?
Might be pretzel time.
Everyone, please, before you walk out of the Center for Fiction, buy a copy of Safe as Houses. Marie will sign it for you. It's so beautiful. You know, buy it for your friends, and support not only Marie tonight, but support the Center for Fiction, which is such a great organization.
Sadly, there are no issues of the Dream Festival. I will let you know of mine.
Yeah. And now pretzels and wine and cupcakes.
And cupcakes.
Yay!